where it is.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah. So we're just gonna rely on the microphone of the camera itself.
I'm sure it's a great camera.
It is now starting.
Oh, we're starting. Great. Good. Here we go. What I'd like to talk about today is I want to speak about music. I want to talk about a halachic approach to music. Particularly this time of year, as we were about to approach Lag BaOmer, there are certain times in the year that we don't listen to music. So when is music allowed in general? And then specifically at these times of year, you have during Sfirat HaOmer, and we also have during the 3 weeks from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, that people have the custom not to listen to music. So I would like to speak about not listening to music in general as a sign of mourning, and then talk about how that applies specifically to this time period in particular. Okay, so I want to make before we start looking in the sources, I just want to make 2 comments about music in general that I think are important before we start looking at the sources. First thing to mention is, I've got a phone here now. On my phone, I can access more music than I could have fit in my entire library of tapes when I was a child. Our access to music today is unprecedented. Even since records, LPs, how long ago was that? Is that 100 years ago?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's say until approximately 100 years ago, if I wanted to listen to music, the only way I could listen to music would be by going to a musician. If I wanted to hear Beethoven, I would need to go to a orchestra. Huh?
To Beethoven, first of all.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you certainly start with him. But if I wanted to listen to music, I would have to be present when the music was being created. There was no recorded music. So therefore, our relationship to music today, the frequency with which we listen to music, the accessibility of music today is unprecedented. And I think that will have an important ramification when we consider what's allowed and what's not allowed, because the Gemara, and also in the Shulchan Aruch, when he speaks about listening to music, they're always talking about live music, because there was nothing other than live music available. And I think that's important just for us to have in the back of our minds as we are considering this topic. Okay, that is preface number 1. Now I want to share with you preface number 2. So we're talking today about not listening to music as a sign of mourning. As we will see in a few minutes, the first link between not listening to music and mourning is from the Gemara. Really, the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, there was a very, very difficult balance that the rabbis had to make. It was really Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and the other great Amoraim at the time, the Tanaim at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. Because on the one hand, the temple is destroyed and we are in mourning, because the Judaism that we are living here is not the ideal Judaism. It's not the Judaism where we can serve Hashem on Har HaBayit. We don't have korbanot. There was no korban tamid offered up this afternoon. So the life that we live now is a non-ideal Judaism, and we mourn and we yearn for the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, and therefore we need avelut, we need to feel that pain. On the other hand, if all our life is yearning for something that we don't have, so after the destruction of the temple, so one thing, we need to feel the pain of the Churban Beit HaMikdash. But on the other hand, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and those at the time, the Tanaim at the time, they also said we need to ensure that we can continue. This isn't the end of Am Yisrael. So if all we're doing is mourning, so then it won't continue. You have to do things which are Zeicher L'Churban, to remember the destruction of the temple, and we are, that's Tisha B'Av, and not listening to music, that we will talk about in a minute. They have to have things which are Zeicher L'Churban, but you also need to have things which are Zeicher L'Mikdash, remembering the Beit HaMikdash, like instituting Tfilot, creating Batei Knesset, the Sidur, all of these innovations in order to ensure a non-Beit HaMikdash centric Judaism, to ensure the survival of Am Yisrael. Because if the center is in this destroyed hill, Har HaBayit, and it may be like that for a long time, so I wonder, I said these Tanaim, if there's going to be continuity. So it was a very difficult balance, because I feel the pain, and I never forget about the pain of Churban Beit HaMikdash, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, that we are living in a bidi avad, a non-ideal situation. We didn't offer up korbanot. This is not the temple is not the center of our avodat Hashem, and it hasn't been for 2,000 years. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, we have to move on. We have to you have to ensure that Judaism survives, and therefore it can't just be about waiting, because if it's just about, it's not something that's easy to pass on. So I think we're going to see both of these ideas reflected in the sources that we look through, but it's important to have both of them in mind before we start looking. Both of the idea that when we speak about music, until 100 years ago, it meant live music, and then this real tension that I think we will feel about like getting the balance right in terms of Zeicher L'Churban, understanding and appreciating Churban Beit HaMikdash, but also ensuring the continuity of Am Yisrael. Okay, so our shir is divided into two parts. The first part is talking really only about music in general. After the destruction of the Second Temple, what music is allowed, what music is not allowed. And then after that, talking about the mourning for the Beit HaMikdash, and see how these principles are applied to Sfirat HaOmer and to the 3 weeks. Joy, joy, joy. I'll tell you just in passing, well, not in passing, we haven't even started yet, but as an introduction, there are people today that if they have a wedding, have you been to weddings in Jerusalem? Oh yeah, thanks so much for coming. Yes, good point. But there are some people who are very cautious. I think my nephew, if I remember correctly, did this, that they didn't have any musical instruments at the wedding in Jerusalem, based on what we're about to learn. So these are not just theoretical teachings, but there are people who are particular about limiting the music that they listen to, especially if you are in Yerushalayim. Okay, so the story starts in the Gemara in Sotah. The Gemara in Sotah, source number 1 tells us, Mishe Batla Sanhedrin, by the time that the Sanhedrin, who sat obviously in the Lishkat HaKasit in the Beit HaMikdash, when the Sanhedrin stopped operating, Batel Hashir, Batei HaMishtaot, Sheneimar Bashir Lo Yishtu Yain. So we're told that when the Sanhedrin stopped, so too Batel Shir Batei Mishtaot, the part they're like a Mishteh parties. We're not going to have no music at parties anymore.
Taverns, maybe.
Huh?
Taverns.
Taverns.
Yeah, taverns.
Taverns. Also, a Beit Mishteh could be like a simcha, like a wedding or you're right, just like a fun place to be. Okay, but not anymore. Not after the Churban HaBayit. So on that, the Rambam says, the Rambam really, you can see, it's very, very much based on the Gemara. Mishechara Beit HaMikdash, after the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, Gazu Chazal, the rabbis established, Shalon Neganeim B'Kli Shir, Uv'chol Minei Kli Zemer, V'chol Mashmiei Kol, Asher Shir, Asur L'smoch B'hem, V'asur L'shom'am Mipnei HaChurban. Now this is really quite a strong categorical prohibition on listening to music after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So the Gemara in Sotah that we looked at is one of the sources. There are other sources we won't look at now. But it is quite a harsh ruling on the part of the Rambam. If we go to the next source, source number 3, we're going to see a little opening to allow us to listen to music. The Meiri, commenting on the Gemara in Gittin, says, Kol minei zemer ha'asuyim lenagen bahem l'simchat holalut ve'ein behem kavana l'shabech et borei yitbarach or l'tzat mitzvah el derech kalut rosh v'ta'anug b'minei ma'achal mishteh asur l'shom'am u'l'shtamsheh bahem בין שנעשה הזמר בכלי שיר, בין בשירה בעל פה. וכל שכן במקום שנשים מצויות שם, שהדבר מביא להרגל עבירה. Okay, so the Meiri is very clear, very harsh about music, but where is it music forbidden? B'simchat holalut. How would you translate simchat holalut? Simcha is joy. Holalut is a...
It's like Hilul?
No. Like empty joy.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean empty joy. It means, well, you know what? I'll tell you what. We're going to do the second part of the Meiri because he contrasts when we can listen to music. I think it's just like stum to go out for music. I don't know. I don't like to be too harsh, but I wonder whether, like a club or a bar. I'm only hesitant to use these words because I have no idea what a club is and I've got no idea what a bar is. I mean, I've walked past, but I've never encountered, so I'm quite cautious in suggesting that they might be what's being referred to here. But there's a good chance that is simchat holalut, and that's therefore forbidden. Now, but look what the Meiri says in the second part. Oh, shalom aleichem, how are you doing? Kol Beseder, music this week. Music. That's why if you listen carefully, you can actually hear some music in the background. Okay, you come for a very good time. We're looking at the Meiri. The Meiri contrasts what we saw. Contrasts two types of music. Music, simchat holalut, which he's really against. And that could be just going out for a night. Any occasion that is a place of praise and gratitude to God, if you go to a wedding, ואין לו לדין בדברים אלו אלא מה שעיניו רואות לפי מקומם ושעתם. Now, I think he says something very, very clever. The Meiri has really said 3 things. First thing is that there's music, just stum music. I don't know if this is true, but let's say you go to like a concert, not a concert of Shlomo Karlebach. You go to a concert of just a stum singer. So that, I wonder if that's just stum holalut, and that would be inappropriate. But if it is music that is part of shirot v'tishbachot l'Hashem yitbarach, so you go to where the words that they're singing are psukim, or they're singing songs that bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is a hit va'adut of a closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then that would be absolutely permitted, according to the Meiri. So it's less music, it's more, I think it's an acknowledgement in the Meiri. If I can read into the Meiri what he doesn't actually say, but I want to extend, I wonder if this is, sort of his rationale, and then somebody will hopefully argue with me, that music is a very, very powerful kli. It opens up emotions inside of us. If I listen to music, there's music that can bring you to tears. You can really be blown away by music. It's a very powerful kli, right? So it all depends how you're using that kli. Are you using that kli as a vehicle with which you become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? that you are, using the music. We sing words of praise to God, or are you just like using the more music to get you into a good mood so you can dance the night away? So it seems, according to the Meiri, that the music, just so that I'm going to dance the night away, is not such a great idea. But music that is bringing me closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that would be fine. It's not the kli, it's the direction that I'm using it. So that is point number 1 and point number 2. But I think the best point of the Meiri are his final words. Look what he says at the end. Ve'ein lo ledayan b'dvarim elu ela ma she'einav ro'ot lefi mikomam v'sha'atam. However, each person, each dayan, has to decide you have to decide for yourself based on where you are and when you are there. I wonder if the Meiri is saying something like, if it feels wrong, it's probably wrong. You know what I mean? If I'm at an event and it doesn't feel right, so it's probably not right. So I can't define it. When you're there, you know you're there. You follow? That's what the Meiri is saying. So the Meiri has taken this pasuk, taken the Gemara at the beginning, that said that after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, we really don't get involved in music. And he says, well, we don't get involved in like dancing the night away, just stum. But if I'm dancing as part of my, using music as a kli to give shirot for tishbachot towards God, then it would be absolutely fine. How do I know whether I'm dancing the night away or shirot for tishbachot? So, when you're there, you know. That is the Meiri. Joy. Oh, really? Really, joy? Oh, come on. Oh, good. Thank you. Oh, you're such a tease. You're such a tease, you are.
Meiri admits a couple of things in between the lines. First one is there's a purpose of the music, in general speaking. Yeah? So
yes.
It could be for the entertainment purposes or to convey the message, which means, in longer run, art of the music can have a function of conveying the messages, right? Therefore, as he says, we can read his last statement, saying like, it depends what kind of message you want to convey. This is your din about the music per se.
Oh, Elon ledayan.
Ledayan is...
Ledayan, like the judge, like the arbitrator.
Arbitrator, yeah. So basically, depending on the message you take, and if the message doesn't feel right, the function doesn't feel right, then it's probably not right. That's kind of...
Perfect. Though you seem to be agreeing, which is, based on what we were saying earlier, a bit of a problem.
Well, do you know what actually is
yeah, go on.
What you said, it's the way he sees the music on this kind of dualistic way, like in black and white, and this is kind of...
He doesn't see it black and white.
He actually does. If the message is not right, conveying not the right message, then it doesn't feel right, then it's wrong.
Right.
Like, if you arbitrate in between the Zivrot Tishbachot and so forth, that's fine. But you should decide. But again, this is kind of like it's a counterpoint between this dance and this dance. How are we going to do it about it? So that's fine.
And he doesn't really talk about what would be the din of going to a classical music concert. He doesn't really touch that. I wonder if that's not...
In his times, probably...
Yeah, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
I know, of course it didn't. But, I wonder whether there's another category. It's sort of like there's music that stirs up emotions in me. Mm-hmm. So I think he's within the dancing public. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Meiri is talking within the dancing public. There's two different types of dances. There's a dance of Hit Karvut Elav, and there's just like dancing the night away for no purpose.
Oh yeah,
and he's
he
more
mentions
into
the Rosh Kalut, so basically...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. He's not talking about music, the Meiri. He's talking really about Shirot. Shirot v'tishbachot. Okay. That is, we've now seen Rishonim. We looked at the Gemara, we looked at Rambam, we looked at the Meiri. I want to go now to the Shulchan Aruch. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read the first two lines, and then I'm going to go to the bottom. Is that okay with everybody? Look what it says. Mishachara Beit Hamidash. After the destruction of the Second Temple, this refers back a little bit to what we said in the introduction. So once the temple was destroyed, Tiknu Chachamim, the rabbis established, Tiknu Chachamim Shebo Oto Dor, She'ein Bonim Lo'olam Binyan Mesuyad Umechuyar Kevinyan Hamlachim Elatach Beito Betit Vesad Besit Umeshayer Makom Ama Al Mama Keneket HaPetach Belo Sid. He's saying that after the temple was destroyed, there's certain things that we do. Our lives are not complete. We are yearning for the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, and we don't build the fancy homes that we built at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. And more than that, even when I build my non-fancy home today, I do not decorate it completely, and I leave a corner opposite the door of an amma on an amma without a paint. Oh, Shmuel, that will make it a bit easier for you. Without paint for that amma. And the reason why I do that is in order to remember the Beit, things aren't complete. Okay, so that's the Shulchan Aruch, and really the Siman continues in that theme, but our theme is about the music, which is at the bottom. V'chein gazru shelo lenagen b'chol b'chli shir, v'chol minei zemer, v'chol mashmi'ei kol asher shel shir l'samech bahem. So he says, and likewise, we don't play musical instruments. V'yesh omrim, some say, this is now the Ramah, davka mishu ragil bahem k'kon hamelachim she'omdim v'shochvim b'chlei shir, o b'beit hamishteh, v'asur l'shomam b'pnei ha'churban. V'afilu shir b'peh, ala yain asura, shenemar b'shir lo yishtu yain, כבר נהגו כל יתרו לומר דברי שיר או שיר על אודות בזיכרון חסדי קודש ברוך הוא על היין, וכן לצורך מצווה כגון בבית החתן וכלה, הכל שרי. So he writes that we don't listen to music nowadays, remembering the Beit HaMikdash. However, the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isilis, adds that this blanket prohibition about listening to music because our lives are incomplete is really only talking about people that will listen to music every single day. Live music every day. I don't have, and maybe some of you do, I do not have like a symphony orchestra at my disposal. If I wanted to listen to music, I would need to listen to it on my phone as opposed to calling a couple of violinists into the room to play some music. So when they speak about people not, the music that was present for some people constantly, like the kings who always had access to music, so that aspect of my luxury lifestyle is going to be removed after the Churban Beit HaMikdash. However, occasional music, and the example he gives is a Chatan v'Kala, Hakol Shari. I would be allowed to listen to music just like at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, because I'm removing the daily, my daily after dinner concert with my violinist. The quartet that come to me after dinner will not come to me after, that's after the Churban Beit HaMikdash, but weddings remain the same. Does that make sense to you? That's really what the Shulchan Aruch is saying. Okay. So, based on everything we've just said, I would suggest that the limitation on music after the Churban Beit HaMikdash is a bit like the Amma al Amma at the corner of my field, the wall. But since most people do not have access to music most of the time, this prohibition on listening to music will not impact most people. However, those people who, every once in a while they have a wedding or a bar mitzvah, so they bring music, that would be permitted, because that's not what's being referred to in the Gemara when we say there's going to be no more music. It means a bit like the Amma in the corner of the wall, that I'm going to be taking out that music aspect from my life. That is the Shulchan Aruch. Is that clear to everybody?
What if you play in the orchestra?
Oh, we can look at that. That is source number 6. That's a good question. But can I ask another question that you were going to ask?
Yeah.
And your other question, I think, is that at the time that the Shulchan Aruch was talking about, the only people that had access to daily music were the kings. But nowadays, I mean, I don't want to show off here, but I have this machine here. I have access to, I can listen to anything on my way home today, basically. You know, I have access to everything. So I wonder whether we would need to limit ourselves in the same way that the Shulchan Aruch was suggesting that they needed at that time to limit the kings, that they shouldn't have access to daily live music. And to that question I will answer that I wonder whether there is a difference between live music and recorded music. As we mentioned in our introduction, there is no, obviously until 100 years ago, there's no discussion of recorded music. There was no such thing as recorded music, and therefore we can but guess, to try to figure out what the Rishonim and Achronim may have said, the earlier Achronim, what they may have said about recorded music, but we can't know for sure what they would say because they didn't write about something that didn't exist at the time. So the Shulchan Aruch's limitations is talking about live music, and I wonder whether the experience of listening to something in your ear is not quite the same as ordering a string quartet to accompany your after dinner like meeting in the drawing room. Is that clear to everybody? Joy? Okay, now to your question. Oh, you know what? Yeah, your question. So the question in source number 6, he talks about people learning. Oh, 1 second. Oh, you know what? It's not there. It must be on the other side. We'll come back to that at the end.
Because they
about learning. It's actually source number 12. We'll get to it right. Let's do it now. Is that okay? He talks about, are you allowed to learn instruments? Was that you're talking about learning instruments?
So doing it for living as well.
So he says, somebody wants to learn how to play an instrument. Mutar. Not only are you allowed to play music, you would even be allowed to play music during Sfirat HaOmer if that's your livelihood. The rationale is obvious because it's not music. It's not like eating pork, which is treif. You follow? Here, what's forbidden in music is not listening to the music. It is, we are just not in a jolly mood. We are not happy. So I'm not going to engage myself in activities that are related to happiness. You follow? Okay. But if you're in pleasure, then there might be a problem. But if I earn my living through playing music, so I might enjoy the music, but it's not, I'm so excited to relax with my family and play a 4-hour gig at the bar mitzvah. So it doesn't create in me that joy that we are trying to avoid. You follow? So if I'm playing for my parnasah, even during Sfirat HaOmer it will be permitted, because it's not the actual music that's forbidden, it's just Mamatim B'Simcha. You follow in that, and obviously if it's my job,
and that
then
leads to the question I literally encountered like a couple of days back.
Brilliant.
I was talking to the guy I met during the Pesach in that community I've been to. He's a professional piano player, like a professional classical piano player. And we had discussion about his parnasah. Basically, he said like, I don't want to play classical music. So why so? You've been trained like from the childhood years. So what's the problem? Oh, because when you don't have such a feeling that you get through this music your whole soul and you pour it through your body to your fingers. This is not the playing. This is kind of like, this is not professional. Let's put it that way. I say, okay. So what's your problem? So what's happened? So you don't want to play it anymore? So like. I was particularly in love with Bach, but as a Jew, I cannot do it. I cannot put it through myself. It's like,
He doesn't want to play Bach.
Bach.
What was Bach?
It's usually like the musical.
Oh, is it very Christian?
It's very classical. And I had nothing to answer. I was like he called me off guard, and I was like, okay, fine.
That's like 90% of classical music.
Yes, it's Christian. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to say.
Very interesting. we need to introduce him to some musicians here in Israel to ask them how they struggle with that.
I guess it's different if it's music and different if it has words like some Ave Maria or something.
Yeah,
But
fine.
that might be a little bit more of an issue.
If you add the lyrics.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
that's a very,
Christian
very
prayers.
good question. No, that's our question today. Your question is a very good question about Jewish music and non-Jewish music. Like, is there such a thing as music that's forbidden? Not because of the joy or not the joy, but really more to do with like Avodah Zarah or Chukot Hagoyim, those sorts of questions. That is a good question, and I think we should dedicate a class, maybe even next week if we were on the theme, to talk about types of music. But really here, the point that we get that really was answering your question of assume we're talking within the genre of permitted music, meaning that there's no Avodah Zarah issue there. But I'm wondering, and this is what we just saw in the Rav Moshe Feinstein, that once the temple was destroyed, there was an effort by the rabbis to reduce the amount of music in our lives. Why? Because music creates simcha, and we are living in a mourning after the destruction of the temple. So it's not such a simcha-filled life, right? And since music creates in me this joy, therefore there's certain times that that's not going to be a good idea. And that's the basis for Rav Moshe Feinstein to permit a musician to earn his parnasah, because that yishuv hadat, that joy, as a member of the orchestra, I am guessing you do not reach the same level of absolute relaxation when you are at a concert as you are as a member of the audience. So therefore, the person who's earning his parnasah, he's not getting that simcha out of his job, because it's his parnasah. He has to do it. He's being paid to do it. Even if he didn't want to go, he would still need to go. And therefore, he would be allowed to play music because it doesn't create that simcha in him that we're trying to avoid. Is that clear? Your question is a brilliant question, a separate question. But I think we're going to have to dedicate a separate lesson to that, and that is to talk about genre of music. That's not our discussion today.
There's something also bothers me. I wanted to ask you because we found this in tonight's sources twice. The first source is from Sota.
Yeah.
It's exactly about Bashir lo yishto yain. And so that's the one thing. And second time we see it in Shulchan Aruch, and we see this like the Asur Lishmoa Mipnei HaChurban. That's obvious. That's the reason. Shir bepe al hayayin asura. So singing with the wine can be taken like on a different ways, right? I'm just trying to understand what is the connection. So is it like on one hand, if Rosh Kalut, you're not supposed to do that because this is the opposite, for example, Kiddush, which is basically singing over yain? Or
I think it's to do a party. It's a party.
Uh-huh.
Like I think the Shirot V'Tishba, it was a party. So wine was part of what was served. Not miraculously, but I think your question actually links very nicely to the next source. Let me read source number 8, and I think he sort of, did I say source number 8? I mean source number 5. It looked like a number 8 before I put my glasses on, but now they're on, it looks more like a 5. So we're going to call it a number 5. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah, look at what the Mishnah Berurah says. He quotes the Maharil, who says, there are people that sing this song, Odecha Kianitani, Lesimchat Meriyot. They're singing, however, but that's a bad idea. Shelo Kadin, I don't like it. Why? Because Ka'az HaTorah Chogeret Chazak V'omeret Asu'uni Banecha Kamin Zemer. He says sometimes there are people who sing songs, but they sing the songs in a belittling manner. When we sing these holy words of Shevach V'Otahai LaKadosh Baruch Hu, if I'm drinking wine, then you're sort of like saying these beautiful psukim, and I'm sort of disrespectful to the psukim, like to be half asleep and half drunk and like, I don't know, like dribbling all over the table as you sing these songs. That's not a way to treat these holy words. If you're singing in a shul, he mentions over here, or in a more mechubad manner, then it's fine. But I think you need to be wary. The Mishnah Berurah adds to the words of the Shulchan Aruch that even though we are allowed to sing Simchat Chatan V'Kala, you have to sing in an appropriate manner. And I will add a footnote to the Mishnah Berurah and tell you that when I was in yeshiva, when I was 18, every Shabbat, probably like they have here, everyone, after the meal, people sat around and they would sing. We had a rabbi who was very particular that we would not sing a song. At the time there was a big popular song called Ana B'Koach. You know, Ana B'Koach is a prayer that we say right before the Chadodi. Said, you have no idea how holy this song is. Said, I can't have you guys sitting half drunk with your wine after a Shabbos meal saying, oh no.
You stand in the shul.
Huh?
You stand in the shul.
Yeah, exactly. Do you realize how holy these words are? And so I think this connection between music and wine is what led the Mishnah Berurah to say, careful, I'm careful here. Because if it's shirot v'tishbachot, you have to make sure that it is in a respectful manner, you're mechabed in the way that you're singing. Because if it's not in a mechubad manner, then even if the music is holy and good and like a simchat chatan v'kala, but it's a lack of respect for the holy words, and therefore it will be a problem. Joy?
Happiness.
Oh wow, what a world. Okay, we've now completed the first part, talking about music and various approaches really until today. And I like the Meiri's distinction between different environments in which people are singing, and really it's the environment that would have a big impact on saying whether something would be appropriate or not. Simchat holalut, bad. Simchat chatan v'kala, good. That's really the what he was saying. And then we spoke about people who are learning to play an instrument and Churban Habayit as well. Okay, that's part number one. Part number two is now to take this principle and see how it applies nowadays to Sfirat Omer. Because we said there's some certain things that we don't do at all nowadays. Like, as I mentioned, there's some weddings nowadays that they don't allow live music with instruments, even until today, in Yerushalayim. Because based on the sources that we looked at, because we are still in Yerushalayim, the Beit HaMikdash is much more present here than it might be in Monsey, New York. Obviously.
During the time of Omer?
No, all year round. So I could go to a wedding in New York and they can have a huge, like a 15-piece band, but then you come in Yerushalayim and then you wouldn't have a band. You'd have, sometimes you have a singer with a drummer, but you wouldn't have more than that because we are still in Churban Beit HaMikdash. Okay, now concerning Sfirat Omer, the Shulchan Aruch tells us, Noagim shelo lisa, you don't get married between Pesach and Shavuot until Lag BaOmer, because this was at the time the students of Rabbi Akiva died. However, you're allowed to get engaged. Now, because we haven't got a lot of time, I want to quickly summarize these sources and share with you what he says. First of all, it's interesting to know that you're not allowed to get married, but you are allowed to get engaged. I just put this in because I thought it was cute. Do you know why you're allowed to get engaged and not you're allowed to get married? Because you don't want anyone else to nab her. Let's say, things are going well. Once things are going well, you don't want to wait around. You know what I mean? Like, that waiting around period is not good. Once you know, you know. You don't need to have a wedding. You can survive a few weeks before the wedding. But once you know, get cracking. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says, and therefore he explains that you're not allowed to have a wedding, but you would be allowed to have erusin during this time period. Okay. Now, there's a very, very interesting history of the why we mourn during Sfirat Omer in source number 9. But I'm going to skip that, if that's okay with everybody. Is that clear? Is that okay? But you should read it to you. It talks about the terrible things that happened. We discussed earlier. The students of Rabbi Akiva, as mentioned in the Gemara in Yevamot. And then we also mentioned, well, we didn't mention, but he mentions here, historically, how the Crusades took place at this time of year. And that's how, through various tragedies, added layers to the story of Sfirat Omer, which led to the Shulchan Aruch viewing this as a time of mourning, and therefore, even though we may generally listen to music during this time, we don't. Okay. Joy. Now we're going to look at two contemporary rabbis. One is Rav Ovadia Yosef, the other one is Rav Moshe Feinstein. Source number 10, Rav Ovadia Yosef says, and this is important for our discussion on the other page, Afal Pi, even though nowadays it is permitted, Mikaradin Lishmor B'Shar Yemei Hashana, Derech Radio V'Rasham Kol. You are allowed to listen to recorded music nowadays, meaning everything that we discussed earlier about Churban Beit HaMikdash, we shouldn't be listening to music, that's only talking about live music. However, you are allowed to listen to recorded music nowadays, even though the temple hasn't been rebuilt.
When we say like recording, is it like regardless if it is happy theme or...
Yeah, whatever you want. We're not talking about Sfirat Omer, we're talking about generally during the year.
Oh, okay.
Aval, second line, Bimei Asfira, during this time period now, V'chein Bimei Bein HaMetzorem, and also likewise between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, where source 10, line 2, Yesh Limana Mileshom Am, you should not listen even to recorded music. Umikol Makom B'Simchot Mitzvah Kekol Mila or Pidyon HaBen, or Siyam Masechta or Bar Mitzvah, Mutar Lishmor Shirei Kodesh HaMeluvim B'Kli Negina Shekol Shehi Simchat Mitzvah Yesh Lakel B'Davar. So there are like three. Am I going to get this right? Let's go. There are a few scenarios. One scenario is a Tuesday. So on a normal day during Sfirat Omer, you should not listen to music, even recorded music. Don't listen to music at all during Sfirat Omer. Because why should you? It's a time of Avelut. However, Rav Ovadia writes, if there is a reason to listen to the music, it's not just a Tuesday afternoon, but it's actually a Wednesday morning at a Brit Milah, so then it's not stam a day, it's a Brit Milah. So the simcha of the Brit Milah would override the morning of Sfirat Omer, and you would be allowed to play music. Rules Rav Ovadia Yosef. Okay, why? Because Simchat Mitzvah overrides this morning. You follow? It's a mitzvah to celebrate a Brit, a mitzvah to celebrate. Obviously, it doesn't mention a wedding because people don't get married during this time. Now, then he adds one little thing. However, Shira B'Peh, what about singing without any musical instruments? That's for my like vocale, music without instruments is permitted for everyone during this time. And indeed, I have on my phone over here, there are leading Jewish singers who have produced albums of vocals only music to be listened to at this time of year. In the olden days, you were stuck. Nowadays, they've got all these singers producing albums. Why? Because the problem is clean negina, musical instruments. But if there are no musical instruments, then it is fine. Now, there's a question: if it sounds so much like a musical instrument, then what have you gained? But that's a discussion for another day that we won't get into now. You follow what I'm saying? Now, why did they say a clean negina is forbidden? What's the added benefit of a clean negina? And do I achieve that same added benefit through like all these strange noises that people can make nowadays that sound just like musical instruments? You follow the question? But we're going to leave that question unanswered. Okay, so we've seen that Rav Ovadia Yosef rules no, unless there's a good reason for yes, in which case you are allowed to. And you are always allowed to listen to music if there are no musical instruments. During this time period, and then also during the 3 weeks. And then finally, the final position here, with whom we will conclude. Rav Moshe Feinstein says, listening to music during Sfirat Omer, yesh le'esor, gam b'bayit kashu la'atzmo, you're not allowed to listen to it even if you're alone at home. שמקל שמי שאינו רגיל כשאינו ביתו מנודן נראה שיעזון בקיבוץ רבים שהוא כוונות שמחה יתרה גם בכל השנה. Okay, so he says basically the minhag nowadays is not to listen to music, as following the same position as Rav Ovadia Yosef.
So Rav Ovadia seems to be more lenient than that.
Yeah, because he mentions the vocali. You're quite right, but it could be that he mentions it later, but I didn't include it in the clip here. I would add over here, I didn't actually add this, that there are people nowadays that neither Rav Ovadia or Rav Moshe Feinstein considered sometimes, and I think there's a greater awareness of this today than there was 20 years ago. There's awareness of the mental health benefits of listening to music. Sometimes I'm not listening to music because it gives me joy, but just, to navigate my day. I think, God forbid, I may slide into, negative thoughts or, might find it difficult to navigate the day.
Nowadays called Sefek Nefashot, basically because of the mental health.
Correct. And therefore, because of the concern, I'm not worried that somebody is going to start dancing around the house as a result of listening to the music. But music is a very, very powerful tool. It can be uplifting. And there's some people for whom that uplifting is a very serious part of their lives. And therefore, for them, they would be allowed to listen to music. Obviously, not like we can hear over there. I don't know what that is. But not live music, and not with a speaker. But if I need to listen to music, I'll put music in my earphones, whatever people use to listen to music privately nowadays, and that would be allowed because I'm not doing it to give me simcha, but I'm just doing it because that is the kli with which I navigate my day. Music, as we really began with, is much more prevalent in our lives nowadays. 20 years ago when you were walking down the street, maybe not 20, maybe 30, 40 years ago when I was walking down the street, you would just walk down the street. But then people that come, they're accustomed to having this music navigate them as they accompany them when they're going on their travels. So it's not joy, it's just that's how I walk around town, then it would be permitted. I should have put that, so I didn't put that source in. I'll have to stick that in. If anyone's, I'll show it to you, Bezrat Hashem, next week. Okay, with that we pause our discussion of music. This difficult balance of, on the one hand, you can't just wallow in sorrow, but on the other hand, we can't forget the Churban Beit HaMikdash and trying to find the right balance, saying what's allowed and what's not allowed. With that, we conclude the discussion of music. But then your question has whetted my appetite to consider what type of, different genres of music. Is there such a thing as Jewish music and non-Jewish music? And that we will contemplate that Be'ezrat Hashem next week. Yishar Koach, have a wonderful, wonderful evening. A joy as always to learn with you. Oh, thank you. Oh, wow.